Welcome to the Early Morning Light Podcast. I'm your host, Tracy Early, and on this podcast, I share life-changing tips, tools, information, motivation, and inspiration to bring light to your life as you tune in week after week. And once again, I'm excited that you have tuned in to the podcast episode this week. I'm going to talk about something that all of us, I believe, need to be aware of. Many of us have put a lot of work into this area, and many of us still need to put work into this area, and many of us are doing really well with this. And it is the idea of maintaining the right attitude. I believe in my life experience, and that's all I can speak from, that one of the key determinants of happiness and success and all the things that we seek in life is our attitude. I once heard someone say that attitude can make or break any situation that you're in. It can either attract situations, people, positive outcomes to you, or your attitude could actually repel or push those things away. And let's just face it, when we are experiencing or dealing with a bad attitude, and we can all probably think right now of times when our attitude has been bad, it typically does not feel good. And those situations tend to not go as well as we would like. So I want to start by sharing a famous, I'm going to call it famous, a famous poem that many of us will recognize. It was written by Chuck Swindoll or Charles Swindoll, however you want to say it. So I'm going to share that with you, and then I'll talk a little more about my own experience with attitude and attitude adjustments and whatnot. But Chuck Swindoll, when he spoke of attitude, he said, "The longer I live, the more I realize the impact of attitude on life. Attitude to me is more important than facts. It is more important than past, than education, than money, than circumstances, than failures, than successes, than what other people may think or say or do. It is more important than appearances, giftedness, or skill. It will make or break a company, a church, a home. The remarkable thing about attitude is that we have a choice every day regarding the attitude we will embrace for that day. We cannot change our past. We cannot change the fact that people will act in a certain way. We cannot change the inevitable. The only thing we can do is play that one string that we have, and that is our attitude." He said, "I am convinced that life is 10% what happens to me and 90% of how I react to it. And so it is with you. We are in charge of our attitude." I tell you, I know many of you have heard that before, or you've read it before, but nothing can be more true or is more true than that particular statement, that particular poem about attitude. So when I think of making attitude adjustments or working on my attitude, I always come back to this Chuck Swindoll poem because it's just so true. It can make or break everything in your life. It can make or break companies, and we've seen that happen probably, or teams. It can make or break a church, right? We've probably seen that happen. It can make or break our success or whatever it is that we're striving for, just based on our attitude. And I like that concept of attitude being, or life being 10% what happens to us and 90% how we react to it. Most of us will not say that we know that in most, if not all cases, what we receive or what we get out of a situation is based on how we react or how we respond to that situation, not what happens, right? We've all been in situations that we have reacted with a positive attitude, a more productive attitude, and things worked out better than when our attitude was not so positive. So this just kind of hit me today because I just realized earlier this week that I was in a situation where I was headed somewhere, and my attitude just wasn't where I like it to be. And I remember physically feeling the physical manifestations of what I would call a poor, funky attitude. It just wasn't, as someone might say, my attitude, it just stunk. Like it just wasn't where I wanted to be with my attitude. And I could feel it starting to affect how the messages I was saying to myself, it was affecting my self-talk and was probably going to affect the interactions I had with people who were around me. And because I've put so much work into my attitude, because I've tuned into the poems or the writings that I just read, like Charles Swindoll and folks like that, because or the messages that I get from Scripture about attitude, I was able to catch myself. And if I'm going to be honest, I'm not always able to do that, but I'm always aware of my attitude. Someone used to say, always be attitude conscious. And I may have shared that before. It is so important that we are aware of our attitude and how it affects the situations that we go into. Just based on our attitude, we can determine what we're going to get out of situations. And what I like about the Chuck Swindoll poem is that he says boldly, we can't change our past, but we can adjust our attitude about it, right? We can't change the fact that other people are going to act the way they act. And let's just face it. Some people's actions are annoying. Some people's actions are frustrating. Some people's actions are offensive. Some people's actions are just not what we want to deal with. But we can't change that. Like I can't change someone else's actions or someone else's attitude even. That's up to them. They have to do, all I can do is control how I respond to that attitude or that action. And Chuck says it well. We can't change those things. We can't even change those things that are inevitable. Some things are just going to happen and we have no control over those things, right? Sometimes the train is going to come down the track and the track is going to shut down and we're going to be stuck in traffic, right? Sometimes things are going to happen in the political world that we can't control. Sometimes, let's just face it, sometimes traumatic things are going to happen that we couldn't predict nor control. But let's think about that. We always have a choice, right? We all have a choice. Whatever happens, we always have a choice whether we're going to respond based on our attitude in a way that feels better, that is more productive, that allows us to feel the way we want to feel, get the results we want, or we can give in to whatever that initial reaction was to what happened, that negative reaction that influences our attitude. So the other day I caught myself and I'm like, man, I'm walking up these stairs and I could feel just the weight of that negative attitude. And some of you guys, I'm sure you can relate to that. And I remember just in my own self-talk saying, all right, Tracy, your attitude stinks, man. And because I've been working on this, I immediately went from recognizing it to saying to myself, what can I do to control my attitude, to get the attitude I want, to accept the things that I can't control and move forward in a way that is more positive for me. And I just thought of 3 to 4 areas that I tend to focus on. Number 1 is I had to start controlling in that moment the thoughts that I was having. Yes, there were some thoughts that I was having that were negative thoughts about a situation that were influencing my attitude in that moment. But I had to catch those thoughts and make a conscious decision to change those thoughts. And I know some of you right now are thinking that's not always easy, Tracy. I mean, we're all going to have those negative thoughts. We're all going to have those thoughts that are not productive, that are not helpful for us. But we can practice catching those thoughts, recognizing them, and then replacing those thoughts with thoughts that are more helpful in those situations. We can all do that. Is it easy? No. But life's not easy. We know that, right? So my thoughts. The other thing that I tend to focus on when I want to change my attitude is I want to change the environment that I'm in if I can. And I will literally try to be around or get around more positive people, positive energy. And I'm kind of an extroverted person. So, that's important to me. So I will change the environment that I'm in. Sometimes it just means getting out of the environment that you're in for some time in order to change your attitude. So that's it. The thoughts, number one. Number two is the environment. And I tend to focus more on the people that I'm around. And I tend to seek out someone who's going to speak something positive to my attitude. The third thing that I tend to focus on is I try to change the information that I'm putting into my head. So for me, that might mean that I will go and listen to something uplifting or positive. Like it could be gospel music at the time. It could be something humorous, something funny that I would listen to, or just an upbeat song. I'm kind of a music person. That's what kind of speaks to me. So I'll do that. So I've changed my thoughts. I've changed the environment. A lot of times it's the person you're interacting with, the people you're around, or just getting out of the environment. And then I've changed what I'm taking into my brain in the way of music or messages. For some of you, that might be something that you read. It might be, sometimes for me, it's if I'm going to change the things that I'm taking in, it's picking up the Bible or an inspirational book or something and reading that. Just whatever it takes to change that attitude in that moment. I don't know about you, but I don't like having a negative attitude. I mean, I can literally feel the physical manifestation of when my attitude is not good. I can feel it, and it doesn't feel good. And if it doesn't feel good to me, then I know it's probably not going to feel good to people who I'm interacting with when I'm experiencing that negative attitude. But as Chuck would say, we have control over it. We can change our attitude. And I know that sounds cliche. Everybody says it, but I mean, just think about it. Does it feel good to have a bad attitude? I think most of us, like if you were going to respond where I could hear you, I would probably hear a resounding no. It doesn't feel good. So I'm just here to tell you, just remind you, this is not new information, that you're in control of your attitude. As Chuck would say, it's really only 10% what happens that's causing that attitude. But 90% of what happens with your attitude is how you react to it. So let's start reacting in a more positive way, to have the attitude we want so that we can bring the right energy into situations that we're in. We can all do that. This is Tracy Early. Thanks for tuning in to the Early Morning Light podcast. Please like this podcast on all the platforms, and I appreciate you tuning in. Stay tuned as I continue to bring light to your life with the Early Morning Light podcast.